Hello, it's Mr. Thompson here again, and I'm here to talk to you about the correct method to use when dividing fractions. This is grade C at GCSE or level 7 at Key Stage 3. To start with then, I want to consider an example that doesn't involve fractions, and the reason being is there is something I want you to get your head around before we move on to fractions. If you get your head around this, it will make life a lot easier. So, I'm going to start with a calculation 18 divided by 6. Now, we all know that the answer to this is 3. When we look at division calculations, 18 divided by 6, from now on, especially with fractions, I want you to consider, instead of 18 divided by 6, we're going to think how many of the second number go into the first number. So in this case, how many 6's are there in 18? And the answer to that is also 3. If you get your head around that, it will make life a lot easier for you. Another thing I want to tell you before we move on is that any whole number can be written as a fraction, and we do that. For example, the number 3 as a whole 3 could be written as a fraction by putting it over 1. So 7 as a fraction could be written as 7 over 1, 9 as a fraction as 9 over 1, and so on. Okay, so we want to start with a really basic example. Let's do here 2 divided by a half. Now, as I've just said, 2 as a fraction could be written as 2 over 1. For this example, I want to keep it really simple though, so at the minute we don't need to use this. So 2 divided by a half, remember how many halves are there in 2. So if I take two holes, and each of those holes I split up into halves, we can see quite easily that there are 1, 2, 3, 4 halves in 2. So the answer to 2 divided by a half is 4. Now though, we're going to move on to a division calculation that involves two fractions, and once we've got a head around this, I'm going to explain a shortcut on how you can do that. So here I have 1 half divided by 1/4. Again, how many quarters are there in 1 half? So what I can do, we can see by drawing again, if I have a whole divided into halves, and then I have a whole divided into quarters, we can see that in the space of 1 half, that also occupies 2 quarters. So the answer to 1 half divided by a quarter gives me 2. We're not always going to be given calculations or divisions with fractions where it's easy to to represent them with pictures though. So let me show you another way of doing this. So we're going to use the calculation 3/4, and we're going to divide that by 2/3. As you can see, this is a slightly more difficult one to represent using pictures. So when we do these kind of calculations, 3/4 divided by 2/3, how many 2/3 are there in 3/4? What we want to do is we want to write it out again, 3/4, write out the first fraction again, sorry. The second fraction we are then going to flip upside down, so the denominator becomes the numerator and the numerator becomes the denominator. So that becomes 3 over 2, or 3 halves. And then what we do is this divided sign becomes a multiply. So now we are going to do, remember when we multiply fractions, this is just a regular multiplication of fractions now. When we multiply fractions, that becomes 3 multiplied by 3 over 4 multiplied by 2, which gives me 9 over 8. So 9 over 8, of course, it would be better practice if we converted that back into a mixed number fraction. So that in 9 there is one lot of whole lot of 8s, so that becomes 1, and then we've got 1/8 left over. So when we divide fractions, 3/4 divided by 2/3, we flip the second fraction upside down and we turn the divide into a multiply. So the answer to 3/4 divided by 2/3 is in fact 1 1/8. Okay then, so we have another example here, this time both with mixed number fractions. Whenever you have a division calculation with fractions that involves mixed number fractions, whether it be just one of them as a mixed number or both of them as a mixed number, they both need to be converted into improper fractions first. So this one, 2 1/4, obviously becomes 9/4. 2 times 4 is 8, plus 1 is 9. And this one here becomes, we're dividing, this one here becomes 4/3. 1 times 3 is 3, plus 1 is 4, and the third stays the same. Now what we have is an example of the example we did right before this one. So we just pick up from there. So we copy out the first fraction again, 9/4, and the second fraction, this one here, 4/3, gets flipped upside down to become 3/4. And then of course our division sign comes down and is turned into a multiply. So from there we can do 9 times 3 is our numerator, and 4 times 4 is our denominator. So 9 times 3 becomes 27, and 4 times 4 becomes 16. And remember, so 2/4 divided by 1 1/3 becomes 27/16. Now remember, it's good practice to change that back into a mixed number fraction, which is actually 1 11/16. So that's your answer. That's your answer to 2/4 divided by 1 1/3. Hope that's been of use, and until next time, goodbye.